At exactly 11:47 p.m. on a cold February night in Manhattan, Marcus Wellington made a phone call that would destroy his family's billion-dollar empire. The 28-year-old heir to Wellington Industries had just proposed to Maria Santos, a night cleaner who earned in an entire year what his family spent on a single dinner party. But this wasn't just a story about forbidden love crossing class lines. What happened in the 3 months that followed would expose secrets buried for decades, test the limits of unconditional love, and prove that sometimes the greatest fortunes are built not with money, but with courage. The phone call lasted exactly 4 minutes and 37 seconds. By the time Marcus hung up, his father had already begun making arrangements that would either save his family's legacy or destroy it forever. Neither Marcus nor Maria knew that Charles Wellington had been planning for this moment for 25 years. They had no idea that every conversation, every glance, every moment of their courtship had been watched, analyzed, and carefully documented. This is the true story of what happened when a billionaire's son chose love over money, and how that choice revealed the shocking truth about America's most secretive family fortune. Before we start this incredible story, please take a moment to like this video, subscribe to our channel, and let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We love hearing from our viewers around the world. Now, let's begin. Wellington Tower stands 47 stories above Manhattan's financial district, its glass walls reflecting the city lights like a monument to American capitalism. On the 47th floor, behind mahogany doors worth more than most people's homes, Marcus Wellington sat alone in his corner office at 2:15 a.m., surrounded by contracts that would make him richer by morning. But Marcus wasn't thinking about money. For the third time that week, he had heard someone crying in the hallway outside his office. Soft, muffled sobs that seemed to echo through the empty corridors like a ghost haunting the building. Tonight, he decided to find out who it was. Maria Santos was 26 years old and had been invisible her entire life. She cleaned the offices of people who earned more in an hour than she made in a month, people who looked through her as if she were part of the furniture. That night, sitting on the floor beside her cleaning cart, she wasn't crying about the bills, though there were plenty of those. She wasn't crying about the 3 jobs she worked to keep her small apartment, though the exhaustion was crushing her. She was crying because earlier that day, doctors had told her that her 8-year-old daughter Sophia needed surgery. Experimental surgery that insurance companies called unnecessary, that would cost $45,000, and that represented Sophia's only chance at a normal life. When Marcus found Maria in that hallway, something shifted in both their worlds. He didn't offer money, didn't make promises, didn't even ask her name. Instead, he sat down on the marble floor beside her cleaning cart and asked the question that would change everything. "What's your daughter's favorite book?" For the next 45 minutes, as maintenance crews worked floors below and security guards made their rounds, a billionaire's son and a night cleaner talked about children's literature, about dreams deferred, and about the strange loneliness that comes from being surrounded by people who don't really see you. When Maria finally stood to continue her work, Marcus made a decision that surprised even him. "I'll be working late again tomorrow night," he said. "Maybe I could bring coffee for both of us." Neither of them realized that Charles Wellington's private security team had been recording everything. For 6 months, Marcus Wellington lived a double life. By day, he negotiated billion-dollar mergers and attended board meetings where decisions affected thousands of jobs. By night, he sat in empty hallways with Maria Santos, learning about a world that existed just outside his family's glass towers. Maria worked 3 jobs. She cleaned offices from midnight to 6 a.m., stocked shelves at a grocery store from 7 to 3, and spent evenings caring for elderly residents at a nursing home. Between jobs, she studied for her nursing degree through an online program, 1 class at a time, paying for each course with tips and overtime wages. Marcus had never met anyone who worked harder or complained less. While his Harvard classmates debated trust fund strategies at exclusive clubs, Maria taught him about choosing between medicine and groceries, about holding 2 crying babies while their grandmother slept, about the mathematics of poverty where every dollar had to serve 3 purposes. The night Marcus first visited Sophia in the hospital changed everything. The 8-year-old was small for her age, her legs weak from a condition that doctors had a long name for but that Maria simply called the thing that makes walking hurt. Sophia's hospital room was filled with library books, dozens of them, all checked out on Maria's card and renewed over and over because buying books wasn't possible. Marcus sat beside Sophia's bed and read to her for 3 hours. He did voices for different characters, acted out dramatic scenes, and listened as Sophia told him about the stories she wrote in a notebook her mother had bought at a dollar store. When visiting hours ended, Marcus made a phone call that would haunt him for months to come. The next morning, the hospital called Maria with news that seemed impossible. An anonymous donation had been made to establish a pediatric care fund, and Sophia's surgery had been approved immediately. The donor, they said, wished to remain unknown but had specifically requested that Sophia's case be prioritized. Maria knew exactly who had made that call. That evening, she waited for Marcus in his office, not to thank him, but to tell him something that would test everything he thought he knew about love and honor. "I can't let you do this," she said. "Not because I don't appreciate it, but because I won't be the poor girl who got saved by the rich man's charity. If you want to be part of my life, part of Sophia's life, then you need to understand something. We don't need rescuing. We need partnership." Marcus had been raised in a world where problems were solved with checkbooks and connections. Maria was teaching him that some gifts could only be given through presence, through showing up, through earning the right to care. For 3 more months, Marcus showed up. He read to Sophia twice a week. He helped Maria study for her nursing exams. He learned to change bedpans at the nursing home and stock shelves at the grocery store. He experienced something his money could never buy: the satisfaction of earning someone's trust through actions rather than assets. By the time Marcus realized he was completely, irrevocably in love with Maria Santos, it was too late to protect either of them from what was coming. Charles Wellington had built his empire by learning everything about everyone who mattered. When his son began spending nights at the office, Charles's security team reported unusual activity. When Marcus started visiting hospitals and nursing homes, private investigators documented every conversation. When $45,000 appeared in a pediatric care fund, Charles knew exactly where it had come from. But Charles Wellington was not the man his son thought he was. The investigation he ordered into Maria Santos would uncover secrets that had been buried for 25 years, secrets that would force Charles to confront the choices he had made when he was younger than Marcus and facing similar impossible decisions. The file on Maria Santos was 3 inches thick. Born in Honduras, brought to America when she was 4 years old. Mother worked in textile factories until arthritis crippled her hands. Father died in a construction accident when Maria was 16, leaving behind debts that would take years to pay off. No criminal record, no questionable associations, no hidden agendas. But there was something else in the file, something that made Charles Wellington's hands shake as he read. Maria Santos had been named in a scholarship application 7 years earlier, recommended by a nursing supervisor who wrote, "This young woman reminds me of someone I knew long ago, someone who had the same fierce determination to build something beautiful from nothing." The nursing supervisor's name was Elena Rodriguez. Charles hadn't heard that name in 26 years, but he remembered everything about the woman who had been his first love, his first heartbreak, and his first lesson in the cruel mathematics of social class. Elena Rodriguez had been 19 when Charles met her, working double shifts at a hotel to support her younger siblings after their parents died in a car accident. Charles had been 22, fresh out of college with business ideas and big dreams but very little money. They had planned to marry, to build something together, to prove that love could triumph over circumstances. But Charles's mentor, the businessman who had agreed to fund Charles's first venture, had made the terms clear. "Business is about trust," he had said. "Investors need to know you make smart decisions about partnerships. All kinds of partnerships." Charles had been forced to choose between Elena and his business future. He chose the business. Elena moved away, married someone else, became Elena Rodriguez, and disappeared from his life. Charles married Victoria 2 years later in what began as a strategic alliance between families but had somehow, against all odds, grown into genuine love. Now, reading about Maria Santos, Charles realized that history was repeating itself. But this time, he was the older man with power, and his son was the young idealist in love with someone deemed unsuitable. The call came at 6:30 a.m. on a Tuesday. Marcus's voice was shaking as he spoke the words Charles had been expecting and dreading. "Dad, I need to talk to you about something important. I'm bringing someone to dinner on Sunday. Someone I want you and Mom to meet." Charles had exactly 5 days to decide whether he would repeat the same mistake that had haunted him for 26 years, or whether he would find the courage to choose differently. The Wellington family estate on Long Island had hosted presidents, celebrities, and foreign dignitaries. The dining room could seat 36 people beneath crystal chandeliers that had once hung in European castles. On the evening Marcus brought Maria Santos home, the massive table was set for just 5 people, but the tension in the room could have filled a stadium. Victoria Wellington had spent 3 days preparing for this dinner, though not in the way most mothers prepare to meet their son's girlfriend. She had hired a private investigator to verify the background check Charles had already completed. She had consulted with a family attorney about protecting their assets. She had even spoken with a public relations firm about managing potential media attention. What Victoria hadn't done was prepare herself for the possibility that she might actually like Maria Santos. Maria arrived wearing a dress she had bought at a consignment shop and altered herself, navy blue with simple lines that would have been appropriate at any social gathering. She brought flowers from a street vendor and a bottle of wine that cost more than she usually spent on groceries for a week, but was still the cheapest option at the store. Marcus's sister Catherine had flown in from London, officially to meet her brother's girlfriend, but actually to serve as Victoria's ally in what they both assumed would be a campaign to break up an unsuitable relationship. The first hour of dinner was a masterclass in passive aggression. Victoria asked polite questions about Maria's work, her family, her plans for the future, in tones that made each inquiry sound like a cross-examination. Catherine shared stories about Marcus's previous girlfriends, all of whom had attended the right schools, came from the right families, and moved in the right circles. But Charles Wellington said almost nothing. He watched Maria handle his wife's subtle hostility with grace, listened to her speak about her daughter with fierce love, and noticed how she never once asked about money, inheritance, or the family business. Most importantly, he saw how Marcus looked at her, with the same desperate, protective love Charles remembered feeling for Elena Rodriguez 26 years earlier. The turning point came when Sophia called. Maria's phone buzzed during dessert, and she immediately apologized and moved to silence it. But 8-year-old Sophia was calling from her hospital bed, frightened by nightmares and missing her mother. What happened next surprised everyone in the room. Instead of making excuses or ending the call quickly, Maria put the phone on speaker and let Sophia talk to everyone at the table. The little girl, unaware of the social tensions swirling around her mother, chattered about her day, asked Marcus if he was coming to read to her tomorrow, and politely thanked Mrs. Wellington for sharing dinner with her mom. When the call ended, Victoria Wellington was crying. Catherine had gone completely silent. And Charles had made a decision that would change everything. The meeting Charles Wellington requested took place in his private study at 7 a.m. the morning after the dinner. Marcus arrived expecting a confrontation about his relationship choices. Instead, his father handed him a manila folder containing 26 years of carefully guarded secrets. "Before you make any decisions about your future," Charles said, "you need to understand mine." The folder contained photographs, letters, and documents that told the story of Elena Rodriguez. Pictures of Charles as a young man, clearly in love, arm in arm with a beautiful young woman who looked remarkably similar to Maria Santos. Love letters written in Charles's handwriting, promising forever to someone who wasn't Victoria. Business documents showing the ultimatum Charles had faced: choose the girl or choose the future. "I was your age when I had to make the same choice you're facing now," Charles said. "I chose the business. I chose security over love, strategy over heart. And I've regretted it every single day for 26 years. But the folder contained something else, something that would test everything Marcus thought he knew about his father's character. Financial records showing that Charles had been quietly supporting Elena Rodriguez for decades. College tuition for her children. Medical bills when her husband got sick. A house payment when they faced foreclosure. Anonymous gifts that had followed Elena's family through 26 years of struggles. "I never forgot her," Charles admitted. "I never stopped loving her. But I also never had the courage to fight for what mattered most. Charles's challenge to Marcus was unlike anything the young man had expected. If you want to marry Maria Santos, you have to prove you're stronger than I was. You have to be willing to lose everything for love. Because I won't make it easy for you. What Charles didn't tell Marcus was that this wasn't cruelty, it was preparation. Charles had spent 26 years building wealth and power, but he had also spent 26 years planning for the day when he could offer his son what he had never been offered, the chance to choose love without losing everything else that mattered. The test began immediately. Charles announced that Marcus was being removed from the family business pending a review of his commitment to company values. Marcus's trust fund was frozen. His company credit cards were canceled. His apartment, which was owned by the family, would need to be vacated within 30 days. To the outside world, it looked like Charles Wellington was punishing his son for an inappropriate relationship. Inside the family, Victoria and Catherine were horrified by what seemed like unnecessary cruelty. Only Charles knew the truth. This was the greatest gift he could give his son. Marcus moved into a studio apartment in Queens. He found work through a temp agency, doing construction and manual labor for $12 an hour. Maria continued her jobs, refusing Marcus's offers to quit and let him support her, even though his support would have consisted of minimum wage paychecks and shared meals of pasta and canned vegetables. For 3 months, Marcus and Maria lived paycheck to paycheck, struggling with rent, worrying about Sophia's ongoing medical needs, and facing the constant stress that comes with financial insecurity. Marcus's Harvard friends stopped calling. His social circle disappeared. The woman he had planned to propose to was suddenly living a life where they counted quarters for laundry money. But something unexpected happened during those 3 months. Marcus discovered muscles he had never used, satisfaction he had never felt, and a sense of partnership with Maria that had nothing to do with money and everything to do with building something together from nothing. When Sophia needed emergency surgery that insurance wouldn't cover, Marcus and Maria held a fundraiser in their neighborhood, asking for help from people who barely had enough for themselves. When their landlord raised the rent, they found a smaller place and made it beautiful with creativity instead of cash. And every week, Charles Wellington received detailed reports from private investigators who documented his son's transformation from privileged heir to working partner in a relationship built on mutual respect rather than financial dependency. After exactly 90 days, Charles made a phone call that would change everything. The knock on Marcus and Maria's apartment door came at 8 p.m. on a Thursday evening. They were studying together at their small kitchen table, Maria working on her nursing coursework while Marcus reviewed job applications for a management position at a construction company. When Marcus opened the door, Charles Wellington stood in the hallway holding 2 cups of coffee from the shop downstairs. "Can I come in?" he asked. "We need to talk." What happened in that modest apartment over the next 2 hours would heal wounds that had festered for decades and create possibilities that none of them had imagined. Charles sat at their kitchen table, the same table where Marcus and Maria had learned to budget groceries and plan for Sophia's medical appointments, and told them the complete truth about the past 3 months. "Everything you've been through was a test," Charles began. "But not the kind of test you think." Charles revealed that he had been watching Marcus and Maria long before the family dinner, long before the forced separation from the family business. He had witnessed their courtship, their mutual respect, their commitment to building something real together. But he had also seen something that reminded him painfully of his own lost opportunity with Elena Rodriguez. "I needed to know if your love could survive the pressure that destroyed mine," Charles said. "I needed to know if you were strong enough to choose each other when choosing each other meant losing everything else." But Charles had been preparing for this conversation for months. The folder he placed on their kitchen table contained documents that would change their understanding of everything that had happened. Business incorporation papers, bank account information, investment portfolios. "Marcus, you haven't been disinherited," Charles said. "You've been prepared." For the past 3 months, while Marcus worked construction and Maria continued cleaning offices, Charles had been establishing the Wellington Family Foundation. Every dollar Marcus had been denied, every benefit he had been stripped of, had instead been invested in creating something larger than personal wealth. The foundation's mission was simple: to provide healthcare access, educational opportunities, and emergency financial assistance to working families. Its first major initiative would be a program to help young parents like Maria complete their education while caring for their children. Its first full-time directors would be Marcus and Maria Wellington. "But there's something else," Charles said, his voice breaking slightly. "Something I should have told you years ago." Charles reached into his jacket and pulled out a photograph. It showed a young woman in a nurse's uniform, smiling beside a man who looked remarkably like Marcus. The woman was Elena Rodriguez, and she was standing in the maternity ward where she had worked before moving away from New York 26 years earlier. Elena Rodriguez was Maria's supervisor when she applied for that nursing scholarship, Charles said. She was the one who recommended Maria, who saw something special in her determination and strength. Elena never knew about my investigation into Maria's background, never knew that her recommendation had connected our families again after all these years. Maria stared at the photograph, recognizing immediately the woman who had mentored her, who had encouraged her to pursue nursing, who had believed in her when she barely believed in herself. "Elena Rodriguez saved my life," Maria whispered. "She got me the scholarship that let me start school. She helped me get the job at the nursing home. She's been like a mother to me since my own mother got sick." Charles nodded, tears streaming down his face. "Elena never stopped believing in love, even after I broke her heart. She spent her life helping people like you, people who reminded her that good things were still possible. And somehow, 26 years later, she led you to my son." The revelation changed everything and nothing. Marcus and Maria were still the same people who had fallen in love over midnight conversations and children's books. But now they understood that their love story was part of something larger, a second chance not just for them, but for Charles to choose differently than he had a generation earlier. The wedding took place 6 months later in the community center where Maria had volunteered every weekend for the past 2 years. It was the same community center where Elena Rodriguez had organized health fairs for families who couldn't afford regular medical care, where Sophia had attended after-school programs while her mother worked multiple jobs. Victoria Wellington had initially suggested the family's country club, a venue that could accommodate 500 guests and would make proper statements about social status. Maria had gently declined, explaining that she wanted to be married in a place that felt like home, surrounded by people who had become family through choice rather than obligation. The guest list included construction workers Marcus had befriended during his months of manual labor, nursing home residents Maria had cared for, grocery store colleagues who had covered her shifts during Sophia's medical emergencies. Charles and Victoria Wellington sat beside cleaning ladies and security guards, investment bankers and single mothers, Harvard graduates and high school dropouts. But the most important guest was Elena Rodriguez, who had flown in from Phoenix where she had been living with her daughter's family. At 72, Elena moved slowly but with the same quiet dignity that had attracted Charles Wellington nearly 3 decades earlier. When Charles saw Elena enter the community center, time seemed to fold in on itself. She was older, grayer, marked by years of work and worry, but her smile was exactly as he remembered it. They spoke for only a few minutes before the ceremony began, but those minutes contained 26 years of unspoken apologies, forgiveness, and the complicated love that had never really ended. "I'm proud of what you built," Elena told Charles. "And I'm proud of what you chose this time." Sophia served as flower girl, walking carefully but confidently down the aisle in a dress that Victoria Wellington had commissioned from the same designer who had created Catherine's wedding gown. The 8-year-old's legs were stronger now after months of physical therapy, and her smile lit up the entire room. Marcus waited at the altar beside a minister who had known Maria since she was 16, who had helped her family navigate immigration paperwork and job applications, who had sat with her in hospital waiting rooms during Sophia's worst medical crises. When Maria walked down the aisle, she was escorted not by her father, who had died years earlier, but by Charles Wellington. It was a gesture that surprised everyone and moved Charles more than he had expected. For those few minutes, walking Maria toward his son, Charles felt like he was healing something that had been broken in himself for decades. The vows Marcus and Maria exchanged were ones they had written together, promises that spoke about partnership rather than possession, about building something together rather than merging separate lives. They promised to work side by side, to dream together, to face challenges as a team, and to remember that their love was both a gift and a responsibility. When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, the entire community center erupted in celebration. But in the front row, Charles Wellington and Elena Rodriguez were both crying, remembering what they had lost and celebrating what their children had found. 2 years after the wedding, the Wellington Family Foundation had become one of the most effective charitable organizations in New York. Working from offices in the same building where Marcus and Maria had first met, they had helped over 3,000 families access healthcare, provided educational scholarships to 200 students, and created a network of community programs that addressed everything from job training to childcare. Marcus had discovered that his Harvard business education was perfectly suited to nonprofit management, but that his real skills came from understanding what it meant to worry about rent money and insurance coverage. Maria had completed her nursing degree and specialized in community health, developing programs that brought medical care directly to families who couldn't take time off work for doctor visits. Sophia, now 10 years old, had become the unofficial mascot of the foundation offices. After school, she would do her homework in the conference room, help file papers, and read stories to other children whose parents attended evening educational programs. Her medical condition was completely managed now, and she ran and played like any other child her age. But perhaps the most unexpected development was the friendship that had grown between Charles Wellington and Elena Rodriguez. After the wedding, Elena had moved back to New York to be closer to Maria and Sophia. She and Charles met for coffee every Tuesday morning, conversations that were part business planning, part personal catching up, and part healing from old wounds. Do you ever wonder what would have happened if we had made different choices back then? Elena asked during one of their Tuesday meetings. Charles considered the question carefully. I used to wonder about that every day, he said. But now I think maybe everything happened the way it was supposed to. Maybe we needed to learn different lessons before we could appreciate what we had. Victoria Wellington had surprised everyone, including herself, by becoming one of Maria's closest friends. The woman who had initially seen Maria as a threat to her family's status had discovered someone who shared her values about family loyalty, hard work, and protecting the people you love. Victoria had also found purpose in foundation work, using her social connections to raise funds and awareness for community programs. Catherine Wellington had returned to London but visited New York monthly, often bringing Sophia gifts and helping with foundation fundraising events. The sister who had once worried about appropriate marriages now regularly told her investment banking colleagues about the importance of social responsibility. But the real measure of Marcus and Maria's impact went beyond statistics and programs. In a world where class divisions seemed to be growing wider, their story had become proof that love could bridge any gap, that families could be created by choice as well as blood, and that the greatest fortunes were built through giving rather than accumulating. 3 months after their second wedding anniversary, Maria and Marcus announced that they were expecting their first child together. The news was celebrated throughout their extended community family, but nowhere more joyfully than by Sophia, who had been asking for a baby brother or sister since the day her mother got married. Charles and Elena had been asked to serve as grandparents to the new baby, a role that completed a circle that had been broken 28 years earlier. 5 years have passed since Marcus Wellington made that phone call that changed everything. The Wellington Family Foundation now operates in 6 cities, has helped over 15,000 families, and has become a model for other organizations seeking to address poverty through dignity rather than charity. Marcus and Maria have 2 children now, with a third on the way. They live in a comfortable house in Queens, the same neighborhood where they struggled through those first months of marriage. Sophia is 15, an honor student who wants to become a doctor, and a big sister who takes her responsibilities very seriously. Charles Wellington serves as chairman of the foundation board but spends most of his time playing with his grandchildren and taking long walks with Elena Rodriguez, the woman he now refers to as his closest friend and most trusted advisor. Victoria Wellington has written a book about redefining success that has become a bestseller among corporate executives seeking more meaningful work. But the most important legacy of Marcus and Maria's love story isn't measured in dollars donated or families helped. It's measured in the lesson they taught about the difference between wealth and riches, about the courage required to choose love over security, and about the possibility of redemption even after decades of regret. The Night Cleaner and the Millionaire's Son proved that the most valuable things in life can't be inherited, can't be bought, and can't be lost as long as we have the courage to protect them. They showed that sometimes the greatest fortunes come not from what we accumulate, but from what we're willing to give up for love. And in a world that often seems divided by money, status, and class, their story reminds us that the human heart recognizes only one currency that truly matters: the willingness to choose each other again and again, no matter what it costs. Thank you for watching this incredible true story. If it moved you, please share it with someone who needs to hear it. Like this video, subscribe to our channel, and let us know in the comments what this story meant to you. We'll see you next time with another story that proves love really can conquer all.